everybody, it's Mike Meyers and Richard Chapman, two bald nerds coming at you with a discussion. This week, I want to be talking about certification study habits. What do you think about that, Richard?
Well, I think it's very important, and we've covered and talked about certifications in the past and so forth. So I think it's a good idea to kind of talk about the exams and the process involved with that. So
I think
it can be pretty daunting.
Yeah, I think a lot of people make a mistake when they're going for certifications, and this doesn't usually just happen on their first certification. They get bad habits, and number one is number one is result is people start studying for certifications and they never get it. And it's so rarely because they don't have the skills. And it's not that very common. They don't have the money. A lot of the problems we're running into, in my opinion, is that people lack a little discipline and some study skills. And I don't care whether you're doing self-study or whether you're doing a boot camp or whether you're going through a university or a tech school. Folks, Richard's already showed me what he wants to talk about, and I agree with everything. So I think with these are almost want to call them platitudes or maybe even truisms about how to get certification, what study habits you got to do to get certified. So
we could probably talk about a list a mile long about different things that we could recommend, but I think we kind of highlighted some main points that do apply to all the different types of studying somebody's going to do for an exam, whether they're, again, going to college or they're doing self-study or they're taking part in a boot camp. So I think the overview should apply to just about anybody and everybody. So
and it also works for almost any certification too. I mean, it's not in any way limited to. Well, of course, me, I'm a CompTIA guy, so I'm going to be thinking in those terms. But I mean, this works across the board. So look, folks, the bottom line is that between me and Richard, you got about 60 years of training, and these are things that Richard believes are right, and he's shown them to me, and this gets the Mike Meyers seal of approval. So let's start with the most important one, Richard.
Wait a minute, hang on a second. You said 60 years, so am I like 10?
I thought you were about 20.
All right.
I really thought that. I'm sorry. Okay. All right then. All right. Well, Richard, for our studio audience, how long have you been teaching, man?
Long enough to know better than to answer that question.
All right. Anyway, whatever the amount of time is, Richard, boy, I tell you, you said the first one, and I agree so much. Schedule it.
Yes.
Schedule it. What do you mean?
Schedule it means you've got to hold yourself accountable. You literally need to log into whatever testing platform you're taking that exam on and pick a date, pick a time, pay for the exam, and have a mark on the calendar. Simple.
Tell them outside, brother.
I mean,
so important. You've got to spend the money. You've got to. Heat and pressure makes diamonds, people. And Richard is absolutely correct. Before you do anything else, you schedule the exam. Now, the question, Richard, people will often say is, schedule it for when? I have to schedule it in the future. How do I know when to schedule it?
Yeah, and that's a difficult thing to talk about and to know if you're just walking into a new certification. I do think that if you do a little research, you utilize resources like the internet, because obviously it has so much, or talk to other people maybe that have taken those certification exams. Ask them how long did it take them to actually go through and study the material.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Reddit, but Reddit does a pretty good job, at least within the CompTIA subreddits, of having normal-ish people there. And these are questions you can ask there equally. And again, I'm just talking about CompTIA. And in this case, I'm just talking about Mike Meyers' National Cyber Group products. And that is, I put a table in the front of every one of my study guides that basically says, do you know, it's kind of like a lets you know where you're at. And then based on that, it gives you the number of hours to study. So let's say 400 hours to study for, I don't know, Security Plus. Okay. That's a little high, I know. But anyway, but then you go through my tables and it says, well, have you ever configured IPv6, native IPv6? No? Okay, well, add this number of hours. If you've done it a lot, subtract this number of hours. And I have found that to be a really handy tool to let people have some idea. If you otherwise, there's 1,000 billion, just type in Discord CompTIA or Discord, whatever the certification is, and just ask people, how many hours did it take? The only other thing I'm going to tell Richard is be careful, because if you talk to anybody in a college and you say how many hours, they'll go, oh, it's a 3-hour program.
Yeah.
Don't confuse college credit hours with butt in seat hours is all I'm trying to say. And then, so once you do that, then you go ahead and schedule it. So let's just say you figure it out. So I need 200 hours of study. I'm going to be able to do, let's make the math easy. I'm going to do 20 hours a week. So that's 10 weeks. All right. Pad it 10%, pad it 20%, just to give yourself a little comfort. And then get on the phone and pull out that credit card and schedule the exam. Yep. If you don't do that, your chances of actually getting a certification drop by half, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the reason why this was number one, because you have to do it. You just have to. You can always, if you set it too far in advance or too far out, you can always move it up closer when you're ready. So if you get closer to being ready and you go, man, I'm ready to go. Let me go ahead and move this exam up and take it this weekend. You can still do that. One thing I do caution people, try everything possible not to push it out. That's something I think people fall into a trap. They do schedule it, but then they go, I'm not ready, or I don't feel ready, and they move it out from there. Don't do that. Like,
see, you're nicer than me, Richard. I don't even tell people that. Hey, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But I won't tell students that. I'm just like,
yeah, right, exactly. All right. Well, the part of this point here too is also talking about the schedule. It's not just scheduling the exam, it's also scheduling good times that you can study, right? You need to create a schedule. Just like you said now, if you figure you need to do X amount of hours of study a week, make sure that you set aside those times. Be specific. Don't generic, oh, I'll study, 6 hours this week. No, I'm going to study 1 hour every single day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You know what I mean? Like, be specific about that schedule. Again, that helps you hold yourself accountable as well too. And it also does allow you to adjust your time if need be as well, and flex that a little bit. What do you think about that? You think that's
I just want to add to that. Number one, I use like Proton calendaring.
Okay.
And I will punch it in. So, okay, so I got 10 weeks. Wednesday's a slow night for me. I've got Saturday free all day. So you punch those into our Google Calendar, whatever your calendaring or thing. I don't like using them as tasks, because almost all tasking tools let you delay the task too easily. Yeah. So, these are study times. So all your study times are put into a calendar. And then on top of that, look, remember we said it's going to take 200 hours of study, so it's going to go 20 hours a week. That's 10 weeks. If it's the end of November, you got the holidays coming up, man. So don't, oh, gee, I forgot. No, you didn't. You just didn't think about it. Get your holiday scheduled in, your aunt's, nurse's, hairdresser's birthday, whatever, is important to you. And don't use those as excuses to go, I'll study next week. Man, that is the death knell when I hear that. Procrastination is the killer of certifications. Man.
Agree. Well, let's move to the next point here, which is
hold on. I gotta get my soapbox here. Hang on a minute.
I have one of those too. I think yours might be a little taller than mine though.
Now, that's something I don't hear very often. It is. I'm kind of pontificating here today, Richard. Go ahead, man.
Listen, I'm good at getting on a soapbox as well when it's something I believe strongly about. So you're amongst good company. All right. So the next item here, not only do you need to have that schedule, but I feel that you need to have a defined location where you're going to study, where there's no distractions, and you've got that time to where you're going to be uninterrupted. You're not going to have, kids coming in, phone ringing, people knocking on the door. Like you have to find a place to where you can lock yourself down and study. Am I forgetting anything or not thinking about anything there?
You're actually developing this further than I would, because, and you're right. Like, for example, this is where boot camps work. Okay. I'm not a huge fan of boot camps. All right. Because I want to learn something. I don't want to just pass a test. And again, I do not consider National Cyber Group to be I know you guys use the word boot camp. I don't see it.
We're not boot camp.
And any program that takes a few months is not a boot camp. Anyway, but the one thing that boot camps do well, in my opinion, is that it really puts an attitude in your head about I'm going to study. So things like distractions, I wouldn't see that as big of an issue in a boot camp. Now, self-study, oh my goodness, yes. What and Richard, I'd never ever considered that before in all my years. But I agree. A location as a good study area, like trying to bounce the baby on your knee and, fried chicken for dinner is not a conducive location and highly distracted for good study. But I would agree. And I guess the only thing I'd add to this is under distractions, make sure your family is part of the team. I've seen people studying for stuff and they're not considering the wife, the kid, the Uncle Richard, and you often get these people tend to be actually fight you. It's surprising to me that without having the family really understanding that what you need to be doing, that they often push against you. So, and I don't know about you, but I've heard plenty of students like, oh, well, my wife, da 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 da, or my uncle, da 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 da. And it's like, man, you have to deal with expectations management, and that's kids. Go ahead.
Listen, I 100% agree with that. And to be perfectly honest, when I went through, and I talk about this all the time, I'm a product of the product when it comes to CyberNow Labs. And years ago, when I went through the program, I 100% told my wife and family, I love you. I'll see you in 20 weeks. And I didn't hang out with them on a regular. I mean, yes, I see them. We're in the same household and things like that. But I wasn't going to the movies with them. We weren't going to parks and doing this and that. I was locked in for 20 weeks and said, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, right? So I think that's a level of dedication that if you can really put it in there, it can help you out tremendously as well.
And try to get some buy-in from those who you love and who you live with is important. Roommates, even things like that.
Of course.
Very good, Richard. You got one on me I didn't think about, brother.
Well, I've got one more here that I'm sure you actually are very familiar with, and that's practice exams. And I think this is kind of the last point before we get into actually talking about taking the exam. So practice exams. How important are practice exams, Mike?
They're part of the holy trinity that makes certification work. You have to have instruction, which is going to be instructor-led, or it's going to be books or maybe videos. You're going to have some kind of reference material, which could either be online or a book to be looking at. And then the third part is you have to test yourself. And that's where practice questions come in. Now, of course, we sell practice questions. But number one, don't buy practice questions from one source. You have to buy two sets, because people who write practice questions get a voice and you get hooked to their voice. So that when you take the actual test, it doesn't sound the same. And you're like, oh, well, that Mike Meyers writes terrible questions. No. I write really good questions. The problem is you got hooked on my voice. So always look for a second. So you have to buy two. You just got to. And I don't tell people how to use practice questions. In my opinion, some people are really good at using it at a very micro level. And this really depends on practice questions. Like with my practice questions, you can do it on a chapter by chapter basis if you want, or you can do it the whole thing. And most of them do. I don't want to name any of my competitors' names, but there's a lot of good ones out there. And they all tend to start with the letter T. That'll be my clue to you. And then, you just gotta just use them so hard. And the only other thing I'm going to talk about practice questions is don't get locked into a question. All right. Multiple choice question. Let's do something silly and easy. How many pins is on DDR4? Oh gosh. Is it 240? I think 248. I forgot. Don't yell at Mike Meyers for getting how many pins. But you'll see a question like that. It'll say, 110, 160, 240, 248. And let's just say the right answer is, I'm so embarrassed I've forgotten this. The right answer is C, 240. On the real test, you're going to see a question that looks a lot like that. I can't tell you how many times, Richard, I've seen guys just answer C because that's what they saw in the practice question. And they're in a panic because they're on the real exam, so they want to move fast. Big mistake. Big mistake.
Well, I think what you were just saying aligns nicely with where we're going next here, as far as, thought processes when you're actually in the exam, because I think this is important to touch on as well too, because not everybody has skills from taking tests. There are some skills from test taking that is kind of standard. Like, let me throw this one at you. In a multiple choice answer, you got four: A, B, C, D, A, B, C, and D, right? Most of the time, you'll probably be able to throw two of those answers out. Would you agree with that? In a multiple choice question? Not always, of course, but
The only thing I'd recommend is, to me, that's step 3 on multiple choice,
agreed.
because for me, step 1 is just knock the I call them candy bars, because they're easy and they're
The
sweet.
gimmies. The
The
gimmies.
gimmies.
Yeah.
So you always go through it multiple choice test 3 times. Number 1,
Yep.
you knock your gimmies out. Number
Yep.
2, and number 1 and number 2 can go hand in hand, and that's where you come in and you do the Richard Chapman knockout sum. Okay.
Yep.
And that's why
Flag it.
I'm sorry.
You knock out the answers that don't make sense. You choose one of the two answers that you think are right and flag it for review later.
Absolutely. And then on the third swipe, what you're doing is you're counting on the test to give itself away for some answers. So on that third swipe, what you're doing is you're going through, and really what you're looking at are those questions with the 2 wrong, where you got a couple knocked out already.
Yep.
And now you're going through and, you're picking up the big magic dice and you're making your best shot.
Right.
One of the things I started seeing in a lot of study situations is people go, "Oh, you've taken multiple choice questions. You know how to do this." Richard, nobody knows how to take a multiple choice test anymore.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, or they've learned the wrong way. And so even simple things like what we're talking here are important. So important.
Well, I think that first step when it comes to the multiple choice answers is when they write the question, there's obviously the right answer. That's one of the answers that they're giving you, right? So they generally start with the right answer as A, B, C, D, E, right? And
Yes.
then they put in generally something that somebody might think is the right answer. And then after that, it's I need 2 more fluff answers or 3 more fluff answers to fill in the other letter choices, right? So I think that the logic, as far as being able to narrow it down, can help out a lot. And if you've studied the material and you feel pretty comfortable with it, I think you're going to be able to make the decision between the 2 remaining once you remove those kind of fluff answers, so to speak. So that's kind of why I focused on this, because I do think it's important. And I think that multiple choice answers, I agree with you. I think that a lot of people don't know how to take them today.
Okay, well, let me add 2 more things then. Okay, so number 1, go with your first answer.
Always.
Especially if you're starting bouncing back and forth, just go with your first answer. You're probably going to be more right there. And the other thing you got to watch out for is balance the test. This is CompTIA, but GIAC, a few other folks have tests where it's not just multiple choice. There's going to be another part where you're going to be doing something else.
Mm-hmm. Simulation.
And I've seen people where they work on the simulate, like with CompTIA exams, all the simulations are right at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I've seen people, you get 90 minutes for most CompTIA exams, and I've seen people waste 80 of those 90 minutes and not really looking at the structure. So the answer is when you're taking a test, know ahead of time what the heck's going to be on there, right? So if you're going to have simulations or something like that, they will tell you, they'll say, "Oh, well, there's going to be 3 to 5 simulations and the rest is multiple choice." Well, then schedule your time wisely in that direction, right? So if I've only got 3 out of 90 questions, now there might be grading, weighting, and stuff like that, but that's how much time you spend on that stuff. And the last one is, I'm going to add one more, and then I'm going to stop.
Okay. Go ahead.
Don't get mad at questions. They're not out to get you, okay? People don't often speak the way you want them to. Can you imagine hanging out with me? I've written my whole life for a living. I find good, you should see me text. I type everything out. I don't even like to use contractions. You know what I mean? Just don't like it. But anyway, don't make the exam out to be the bad guy, okay? learn that people think and say things differently, understand that I don't think I've ever taken a certification exam that I didn't find an error in. Now, most of these were just grammatical and trivial, but I find others where it's like there is no possible way any of these questions could possibly be right. Tough. Answer one. Life's hard. Get a helmet. All right. I'm done.
Nice, nice. Well, I think we kind of hammered out the first part there, which is to look at those questions, the ones that are the gimmies, take care of those, get those out of the way. If there are simulation questions, I agree with you. A lot of times they're at the very beginning. So maybe put a pause on those. As a matter of fact, on the next one here, we're going to talk about, that's kind of where we go. But when you're taking those multiple choice answers and trying to decide, if you're not sure on the answer, flag it. But be careful, mark your answer, flag it. And then when you come back, just be super careful that you are sure if you change it. Go with your right answer, with your first answer, like you said earlier. I think that's the value in flagging those questions, is to go back and review just to make sure. And you may find something in the test that helps you out, but be super careful about changing those answers. Go with that first one, flag it for review, and then kind of go back through it. For me, the next part are those simulation. If there are simulation questions, these were the last ones I always do when I take a certification exam. I think that they do take a little more time in a lot of cases. If you spend a lot of time in these at the beginning, like you mentioned earlier, you're missing out on a lot of gimmies that are going to give you a lot of points on the exam. So simulation questions definitely would come next. And again, the last part is review those flagged ones afterwards. We kind of talked about, I think, pretty much every one of these. See, that's the thing about you and I. We just get on a flow and all the bullet points just kind of go out the window.
I can't tell you how many times I have mauled PowerPoint presentations. Because, come on, Richard, this is stuff we do daily. You know what I mean?
Agree.
So
Agree.
I get in trouble all the time too. I understand.
But at the end of the day, I think that if you can follow the methodology like we've just been talking about, I think you're going to do really well. If you've studied well, if you've followed these habits, you created good study habits, you've taken practice exams, you do the exam the way that we just talked about, and make sure you kind of step through it and keeping in mind your time as you're going through. I think that most people will find pretty decent success. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
All right.
Folks, well, keep in mind, when you're between Richard and I, we've literally helped millions of people get certification. These are almost platitudes in our eyes, but that doesn't mean they're platitudes in your eyes. And, if you go through these few steps, certifications will be an easy part of your life and not the big challenge that so many people make it out to be. And on that positive, play some music, play some John Philip Sousa music as we got.
Who needs a soundtrack when you have Mike Meyers?
Darn tootin'. All right. Richard, thanks, man. It's good stuff. I'm going to be up in DC sooner again. Hey, I'm going to be up there right at the by Valentine's Day-ish. So you're going to have to put up with me again, I'm afraid.
Love it. Love it. Looking forward to it as always.
All right, folks. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next Two Bald Nerds. If you like Two Bald Nerds, check out our entire playlist right here. It's a lot of fun. We'll see you there.